Hey everyone, my name is Rose and welcome to today's sewing video. If you're new here, I create some sewing content and I hope you enjoy this one. Today is a little different because we're going to be remaking something I personally own. So it's a store-bought sample. It's just something I really love. I'm actually wearing it right now. I'll give you a better close-up. But it's just like a nice Skort. I have a hard time finding some Skort sewing patterns. I found this pattern, it's Zara, but I found it at the secondhand store and I kind of just became really obsessed with it. I like the concept of Skorts, obviously, because like you can go out and not worry if it's windy and it flies up and you know your underwear is showing. So I love that. I love the fit of this. However, there's a couple things I want to change. So I'm not sure if you can see this, but I'll share a better view. But it's too big on the waist, and I don't think I need the ties that go behind me. So those are two changes that I'm going to be making. And in this video, I'm gonna just take you along the process of patterning something that is already existing, that it's already together. So for this, you'll need a little bit of understanding of pattern making, but I'm just gonna show you how to do this. And then I want you to try something maybe simple, like a shirt, something simple like this, you know, just to give it practice, because practice makes perfect and nothing is like immediately getting. So let's go along with the process. This is my Skort pattern on the flat. On the back portion, I do have 2 darts. The skirt portion is a full skirt, so you'll see the process of that later. And we do have a half short here. Looking inside our short, we have a facing, our darts here, and the first step, we're going to lay everything down on our pattern paper and begin to trace. So I'm only doing half of the pattern, so I go from the center back all the way out to the side seam, down to the skirt seam, and then back to the center back seam. Next up, I am measuring just where my dart is, so I just add a little tick line, and to get that curvature of that skirt seam, what you're just going to do is peel it back and start to pencil from the center back seam or from the out seam all the way out. And I'm just adding little tick marks, and I'm going to fix this line again with my hip curve. At this point, I'm just going back and double checking all of my measurements against the actual physical sample. So I measure, you know, the center back, see this height, make sure it's the same on my pattern paper, because at this point there's no seam allowance. And I just go back and forth at all of the most important parts. I am fixing my curve lines and adding all of my seam allowances. I also make sure and double check the dart length and how much that we're taking in the dart, which was about 3/8. So I'm just like indicating that here. So I'm just making sure that the skirt seam is accurate. So at the center back, that has to be a right angle. So that I double check with my ruler, and I'm just readjusting that curvature seam and just double checking with my hip curve as well. For the front pattern, I am just placing some pins in the seam at the center back, because typically on patterns, the center back seams are different than the front seams. And in this case, the center back was a little bit lower than the front. And you can just kind of see that here from where the seam was indicated. This is usually because the curvature of your back, and in this case your butt, because this is going over the butt, and in order to make sure the front and back are the same length, the back is longer to compensate for the curvature of your butt. So I really like doing this as a little bit quicker of a step. So I'm kind of using the back as a guide for our front. I'm making some small adjustments, making sure that the center front is a little bit shorter on the front than on the back, as we had just talked about. And I'm also just double checking the curvature of the front is at the same as on the sample, and all these like small things, because you can only do so much on the flat pattern. A lot of it is checking on the physical sample after everything is sewn together. For the front, I did as much as I can do, so I'm just going to adding all my last minute details, which is my seam allowance and all of my pattern information. Next up, we're going to be tackling the back, because as you saw, there was a dart, but we didn't slash and spread the dart just yet. So I indicated on the pattern the placement, the depth, and now we have to add like the actual amount that we close this dart. So in order to do this, we have to slash and spread. So you're going to take your scissor and we're cutting all the way down into the skirt seam line, and we're going to add back what was like folded into that dart. So on the half it was 3/8, and we're going to double that to 5/8. I redid my dart point, and at this point we're going to be folding the dart paper, and we have to mark actually what the dart shape looks like when the pattern is flat. So you're going to need your tracing wheel, and you're going to trace along that seam allowance at the waist seam in order to get the correct shaping of our new dart. After you release your pins, you should see a natural line to trace on, and after this, all you do is cut everything out, and we're almost at the sewing process. So this is like one of the most important parts of pattern making is what it's called truing your pattern. So making sure all the parts that are being sewn together are lining up. So for example, I'm taking, so this is your seam allowance. I'm overlapping the actual sewing seam with the front and the back at the side. And you can see here, there's just this like little slight dip here, but that's your seam allowance. That's no problem. So another really important thing here is making sure that these connecting pieces they have like seams that are easy to sew. So sometimes you'll see something like this and you're like, oh, like I'm not going to sew something really funky and uncomfortable. Like as I'm sewing down here, as I'm sewing this together, I want everything to kind of be easy to sew into each other, and I don't want any funky pivots. So this is where you're really checking to make sure, and I'll see if I can have like a better example in a little bit. But this looks really good, this looks really good. So we're gonna move on to the short portion. As I wear something like this, it kind of flops out, which is something I don't love. I think if I'm making it again with this facing, I would tack here, but you know, this is Zara, and this is probably just their means of cutting time, which is cutting cost in the long run. But if I have a light enough lining or fabric, I think I would line this and get rid of this. Or if my fabric I choose in the future is a little heavier, I do the facing and I tack here, so as I'm wearing it, it just doesn't come up, so you see like the label. So this is initially a cut 1. I'm gonna record that on my pattern, and we're moving into the short. So as you can see, when I flip it inside out, the short, this is like your cut 1. This is the top, which we just did. Your short is like half a short in theory. So the short is half a short. So you're trying to just like when you're tracing, I see what happened here. So when you're making your copy of the pattern, you want it to lay like as flat as if you have like the flat pattern piece, the paper in front of you. So I'm making sure that my seam is at the side, and I just realized this pattern is like on the fold, so there's actually no side seam. The short is long and it continues into the back, and it only is met and joined at your inseam here. So this is going to be nice and straight, like I'm pressing down and flattening everything. Your hem, like here and here, is like a right angle, so you know that your pattern pieces are nice and flat. And you can either lay it on top, which is what I'm going to do for this piece because it's a little bit more challenging than tracing the front, or you can put it underneath. So it's your preference. This time I'm going to show you on top just so you can see like a little variation. We're starting from our seam. This is our right angle here, smoothing up so our inseam is curved, and then smoothing out, because this line here where the top connects to the short is also slightly curved, as you saw in the pattern before. I'm going to flip it back because see, you can see our seam here, and I'm going to mark our sewing line here. This is our right angle So in theory, I can just add one little tick here because this is straight. I am constantly flipping it up to check everything here. This may be a seam that goes up, 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 a little bit curved up. So we will check that with our measurements in comparison later. A rise, curving up, up like so. And then we flip it back, right? So this actually comes up a little higher. And I'm not including my seam allowance right now. I'm going to start measuring everything. So I'm gonna measure from the connection into my hem. So that's 5 3/4. 5 3/4, and I tick that on my paper. And then I'm just kind of going now to the out seam. That's about, and that becomes my correction. So now I have that straight line at my hem. So that was a measurement that was correct on my pattern paper. Then I'm checking my inseam. So my inseam, the sewing line to the actual hem is 2 1/4. Perfect, that worked out as well. And I'm giving myself that inseam line. This I can measure on a curve here, like the seam. That's about 4 yeah, perfect. 4 3/4. Now I feel a little comfortable doing this myself, so I'm just kind of doing a little also tiny ticks, 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 ticks to come all the way up. Great. Then I'm gonna measure from here to the out seam. So I just walk my ruler out. That's about 11 1/2. Yeah, perfect. This all kind of seems to be working out. I'm making, this is my, forgive my little crinkle of the paper, but this is the 90 degrees here, which is reflected here, 90 degrees. And then also up here should also be 90. And then I'm gonna go in with a slight hip curve, add all my seam allowances. This is the fold, and we're gonna repeat on the other side. So this is an actual full circle skirt, and I am just making I made a line that was nice and straight. I'm aligning the seams along that line, and I'm just retracing the entire skirt portion. So this is like the easiest out of all the steps. I am just going all along the outside seam like this, and then I'm also going to flip back the skirt and trace the actual skirt seam itself to make sure that everything is aligning. I'm obviously going to be folding this in half and just using like half this and then cutting everything out and then opening out to the full fold of this pattern piece. And this just makes everything a lot more accurate so that it could be doubled easily. Everyone, okay, so the pattern is done, but there's always something to work on with the pattern itself. I want to make some fit updates. For example, I normally wear this skirt here. However, you can see here how it's like a little bit big, but I like the fullness here, so I'm not gonna like grade down a size. However, what it looks like it kind of needs is, I think I need to remove about like 1 inch on both front and back skirt pieces, and then grade to a 0 at the sides. Then I'm going to, for my first sample, add this. So I still have to make this, which is very simple. I can share the process as well. And I'm gonna leave these out because I don't really want to use them. I'm using it right now just to kind of pull it back and to make this fit me properly. But in the long run, I don't think I need this. Yeah, let's get to it. Let's get to our fit correction. So initially I was going to show the fit corrections after the sewing was completed. However, I think this might be a little bit easier. We're going to, this is 1 inch from here to here. So I'm gonna mark that. Maybe I use a bigger, brighter color for us. Yes, and then this is our side seam, the hem edge here. So I'm going to grade here to here. I'm going to cut here and apply the same corrections to the back as well. So also just to kind of point out for pattern making, what could have been better is if I did this with like the paper on the fold so that I can see the full open piece, because if you can tell, it kind of points here and it dips up here. So what I have to do for patterning is probably like pick this seam up like 1/8 so that this is a nicer curve here, and then drop this about maybe 3/16 so that it curves nice. The facing on mine was about, let's say, I would say like 2 inches. This is how you make that pattern piece, because I'm following the curve of the waist like that. And this is our facing piece. I'm going to also add back like that 1/8 up here so that this is already corrected. And to do that, I'm just going to add some patterning paper here. I'm going to pick this up like 1/8 here. My update fit is in blue. So you can see here, there's that little lift. And then there's this to be nice and straight. And then this is the pattern already corrected. I find that if I don't correct the pattern immediately and I put it off, things don't get corrected, or I forget. So I'm also going to fix this piece. I add like, you know, anything here. I'm gonna go in and add this straight line so that I can take this. Yeah, I wanted to just extend this up just ever so slightly so that this drops and then continues into the hem very, very nice and easily. I'm gonna add back, okay. So this. So for our facing, it's important that we close our darts, because in the skirt itself, the facings do not have darts, so we will not be adding them to ours either. So you can either like temporarily close the dart with some pins, or I also sometimes use some tape, and then you can untape it. I'm going in adding that facing as well, just like so. Following the curvature of the waistline. And then this is going to be traced. Same thing here, adding the seam allowance. Then I undo the pin. The last thing I'm going to do for all my pattern pieces is just make sure that all of the pattern details are there. The grain line, the how many you're cutting, the name, all of those things are so important to have in your pattern paper, because things get lost and then you have random pattern pieces in your home. So sewing is going to be really quick for this because I'm not doing too in depth, but I'm going to sew on my interfacing or my facing soon, and I'm connecting my front and back pattern pieces before I do that. I always like to go in and add the understitching. I just want everything to be super perfect for this, because that makes your next fit, to make sure all of your pattern is correct. All of that is so important. So I'm adding all of these details to make the next stage even simpler. And overall, this is what it's looking like so far. When I open it, you can see the facing, everything looks super neat, and I'm really excited about this. I'm not going in and adding those tacking until later, just to make sure it doesn't affect anything with our fit.
I'm going to close the side seam just a bit. I think I have maybe a 7-inch zipper or something like that here, so that'll go here. Then we're going to move on to our little undershort layer. So now we're going to sew here, and then here, and then connect the inseams. Okay, so we have now everything sandwiched together properly. So this is on the outer side, this is the short. Then on the inner side, I have the outside top portion, and then sandwiched in between the in-between layer, that's the skirt. So I'm pretty sure this is how everything is supposed to be. So we're gonna sew all of this together, and then the last thing is doing all your hems and adding in that zipper.
All right, so this is my first fit, and overall, I really love it. But there are a few things that are just kind of calling out to me, and a lot of it has to do with balance. So you can kind of see here that the back, the center back of the top portion is kind of riding up. So I think what I have to do is elongate that. And then there's also some drag lines in between the darts. That is probably from the back portion being a little bit too small. So I'm going to add some fullness back here, and then also reduce the length of the darts. And hopefully all of that gets corrected. So you can see here, I ended up pinning out some things, and also the side seam you can see here is kind of dipping into a V. That should not be the case. It should be a nice smooth smile. So all of these things are going to be corrected on our flat pattern, and I'm going to remake this one more time. So these are the corrections I made on my pieces. The center backs are put together, and you can see on the back, I lengthened the back about 1 inch. I also added about 1/4 of an inch to the outside of like your hip curve on the back, and the side seams of the top portion. I also raised about a 1/2 inch, so it's a nice smile at the side seams. So this one was my first sample. So this one, it came out pretty good. However, at the side seam and at the back, I noticed there was a bit of unbalancedness. So this is what I corrected in the second pattern, but this one still came out pretty cute, and I still will wear it. Also, this top, if it doesn't look familiar already, this I also recreated from another vintage sample, and I will link the video for that one below. And this is my sample with all of my corrections made. You can see here that the side is so much more balanced, and the back does not have the drag lines anymore. And overall, I am so pleased with how this one came out. This wasn't the final fabric, so I will make this one more time and share on this channel the final make. Thank you so much for watching this far. I appreciate all of you. Please like and subscribe if you like this content to see more, and I'll see you next time. Bye.